just quickly, as we're testing the 200 period, be breaching some trend lines, but we're hitting this horizontal support. This is the horizontal support. It's a horizontal support going back to the October low, going back to the November low before the election rally right there. Then we filled that gap, and then we rallied up again to new highs. We filled the CPI gap, but we moved beyond it. You've got the 200 period. You've got this horizontal support right here. You've got the some VWAP support. This VWAP support down here is from underneath the 200 period. This is from our March low and our March high and our April low. Those are those levels. It is interesting surrounding the 200 that you have this major horizontal support area, and again right here we breached it, but we didn't close below it. Still may close below it. Still may try to test the 200 some more, but you've got this major support right here. So just something worth paying attention to here on the S&P 500 daily chart. We had the tariffs on Canada and Mexico begin, along with China, additional tariffs on China. Canada has immediately put in retaliatory tariffs and going to put in more later in the month. Apparently China has responded as well, and Mexico is expected to do the same on Sunday. Now, Canada is retaliating with more tariffs, and again, the Canadian tariffs are higher than the United States tariffs on Canadian products. So they're trying to level the playing field, just slapping on more retaliatory tariffs, and Trump's saying he's going to raise the tariffs up to whatever Canada says. So you got this fear of this trade war, and the media is doing their best to try to convince us that there's this massive trade war. Again, remember last month we had the tariffs for about a day and a half, and then they were paused. I expect something's going to happen. Now, either that or the market's going to shrug it off, focus on other things like tax cuts. We tagged the 200 period moving average today on the S&P 500, on the NASDAQ, and Bitcoin retested it with the higher low. That bullish divergence is forming all over the place on the intraday charts. We did get retaliatory tariffs put in place. Canada and China, the market tumbling down to the 200 period moving average on the S&P 500 and NASDAQ, going very, very oversold, extreme fear, very, very bearish sentiment. I don't know what's going to happen, but something's going to happen that's going to give us a rebound back up. We could see concessions out of Mexico and Canada immediately, as we did last month. Narrative all over the internet, all over with the media, experts, everybody out there warning us is going to cause inflation. It's going to create a trade war, and it's just going to be bad. You know, the thing about this is, put on your thinking cap with me for a moment. We have the high tariffs with Canada. We have the high, you have hundreds of percent tariffs on some agricultural products and things like that with Canada. The U.S. products going into Canada. Same thing with U.S. products going into the European Union. You have some high tariffs. You have more tariffs on things, U.S. products going into the European Union than the European products going into America. Well, I mean, think this through with me for a minute. Okay, so why don't we have this hyperinflation in Europe? Why don't we have this hyperinflation in Canada? If this is going to, is it just the United States tariffs that are isolated, that those tariffs cause inflation, but none of the other tariffs do? I mean, it's really stupid. All the tariffs from other countries, those don't cause inflation, but the United States, those tariffs cause inflation. The United States tariffs, those cause a trade war. But all the tariffs that all these other countries, which are more egregious than the United States, those tariffs, they don't cause a trade war. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, I don't like Trump's tariffs. I don't like Europe's tariffs. I don't like Canada's tariffs. I don't like anybody's tariffs. I like free trade. But these people, the media, are trying to convince us we're going to have a trade war, which we don't yet. Just began the tariffs right now. We'll see what happens. Maybe they go away again. The idea that Trump's doing this is he's trying to get more favorable trading terms with our trading partners in other countries. I'm not a fan of Trump's tariffs. I don't like them. The media is doing their best to convince us we have this trade war going on. And again, so far we've seen the tariffs put on and paused. We've seen the other tariffs for Europe announced, but they haven't started. Maybe we get a trade war, but we don't have one right now. I'm just trying to say the way the media is presenting this, down is up and up is down. Look, if these countries want tariffs, then all they have to do is remove their tariffs, and the United States will not impose tariffs. The United States is matching the tariffs that are already in place, and these countries are feigning outrage of the tariffs, are guilty of worse tariffs than what the United States is doing currently, trying to start by leveling the playing field here. So again, I don't like the tariffs, but I just want you to understand, again, it would tell us this is going to cause inflation. Well, then why doesn't the Canadian or the European tariffs, why don't those cause inflation? Do only United States tariffs cause inflation? Tariffs do not cause inflation. I mean, inflation is caused by an increase in the money supply. The stuff that the Fed does, they cause inflation, not tariffs. Tariffs acts as a one-time tax. Some prices go up, some prices go down. Again, it's caused inflation. In 2018, we didn't have inflation from the tariffs Trump imposed back then. We didn't have it in the 1920s or 30s, and we had 40% tariffs. We didn't have inflation, we had deflation. So a lot of the arguments being made in the media is just a bunch of nonsense. It really is. See what happens. Now watch the address that Trump's going to be giving to Congress. He's moving the markets every day. Every day he's moving the markets up and down. Maybe he moves them back up now. Our 200 period moving average. The institutions watch that level. A couple of things. Again, we could see something said in this address that could move markets. We could see some kind of deal reached, temporary deal with the tariffs with Canada, Mexico. It could rally markets. Zelensky is now expected to go back to the White House, sign the minerals deal, and talk about the peace process. Does that help the market? Do we see the market go, wow, the Ukraine war is going to end? Do we get a rally surrounding that and the peace process that is likely coming in the next few days? No, I don't know what the catalyst will be. Maybe it will be a combination of things. Talked about the tax cuts, and we're going forward with that. Hopes that all that money, filters its way into the market. This Doge dividend, which amounts to a tax refund. I don't know if they're going to do it, but if Wall Street could get excited about that, does that filter its way into the markets? Right now, we're seeing extreme fear, very bearish sentiment, as I talked about yesterday, 60.6 on the AAII sentiment survey, a one-year high. We see a bottom surrounding our 200 period moving average. Candle of indecision here. We actually had rallied back up and went positive, turned back down, and got this kind of a sloppy spinning top, kind of a candle of indecision here just above our 200 period moving average. Again, well, Class B diversions, price moving lower. We have possibly two equal lows here, very, very close to one another. Very, very oversold. Now we're seeing the 10 drop below the 50. The 20 is turning down. It's still above the 50. But again, institutions watch the 200 period moving average. Do we see a rebound? I talked about the failed breakout back up at the top at the 19th. The 19th of February, I talked about this failed breakout. We had it both on the S&P and the NASDAQ. Do we see now an attempted recovery? We broke the 100 period moving, we broke the January low. But we didn't close below the January low. We closed just above it, but we did have an intraday push below it, testing our 200 period. We still may attempt to test it further. Now, Bitcoin already bottomed on Friday, and it got a higher low testing the 200 today. So again, Bitcoin testing the 200, you got the S&P testing the 200, you got the NASDAQ testing the 200. NASDAQ did what Bitcoin did and dropped below it. S&P stayed above it. So we'll be watching all of this. But again, you've got divergences forming on these intraday charts. Now, maybe we still go and take out that 200 period and then try to bottom. That's what Bitcoin did. NASDAQ just did that today for a test of the 200. These bearish divergences back on February 19th that has given us the sell-off. Do the bullish divergences, multiple point bullish divergences, give us a rebound surrounding our 200 period moving average? NASDAQ testing that 200 period, getting a hollow red candlestick today. Look at that. And oftentimes, hollow red candlesticks mark short-term bottoms. We had it at this bottom, and we had it over here at these lows over here. So do you see that? So again, oftentimes hollow red candlesticks can, not always, but can mark reversals. We have a spinning top, a nice looking spinning top here, which again, if we get a big wide range bar tomorrow and rally back up, you'd have an evening star, or I'm sorry, a morning star reversal. You'd have the wide range bar down, you'd have the candle of indecision, and then you'd have the rebound back up. And that could be a bottom if we try to bottom surrounding just under our 200 period here on the NASDAQ. We filled the gap over here, and then now we've taken out the 200, and we came back down, we filled that gap from the election today on the NASDAQ, which you can see right here. We came down, we hit that gap fill area, we moved below it, and then we turned back up, and we got that candle of indecision with the spinning top and the hollow red candlestick. So we've now filled the election gap. We never did do that before. We've now done it. So again, we'll be watching to see, do we try to put in a tradable bottom surrounding our 200 period here or coming days ahead. We'll be watching to see how all of that unfolds. But you did get an attempted rebound off of the 200 period moving averages, and you did get possible reversal bars at the 200 period with our spinning top candlestick here on the NASDAQ up close there, and we closed above the 200, by the way, and kind of sloppy spinning top here on the S&P. No hollow red candlestick here like on the NASDAQ, but it is a spinning top candlestick. And again, we could see an attempted reversal. So we'll be watching. What does that? Do we see sessions out of Mexico and Canada again? Do we see some kind of agreement between the United States and our neighboring countries here? Or market shrug it off and focus on something else? I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I'm just telling you, we're hitting the 200 period. Institutions watch that level. So we'll be watching to see if we attempt a recovery. While we're going lower, testing the 200 period, the stock market's already followed Bitcoin down. Bitcoin already tested it. It's now setting up a higher low on Bitcoin's intraday charts, and we're getting that on the daily chart. This is creating a bottoming tail. The session for Bitcoin closes in a few hours. It trades around the clock. I think Bitcoin's got this first wave going on, and we could see the market follow, because the market followed Bitcoin down. And again, you may not like cryptocurrency, you may not like Bitcoin, but right now the market is following Bitcoin. I think the Bitcoin ETF is going to come up here and fill this gap. This is the IBIT ETF, and I think that the stock market is going to follow Bitcoin. But Bitcoin, if it did get a higher low here with IBIT and on the Bitcoin price, the market is likely going to follow. Bitcoin's trying to bounce off the 2023 trend line. Bitcoin right here trying to get a bottoming tail at the 200. It already broke the 200 period moving average over here, and we did it again briefly today, and the market is following Bitcoin. Bitcoin completed the wave 4 here. If this low can hold in this WXY type of a pattern here from wave 3 to 4, and if it is bottoming with the higher low, we could try to break the trend line, get a big rally, back test. We could see the market follow Bitcoin and try to bust up to new highs. I think both of them will. I think they're both going to top later. All the negativity right now is surrounding the tariffs, concerns about the trade war, concerns about inflation. If all that went away, if it stayed and the market started focusing on something else, just had the crypto strategic reserves announced, probably more good news on crypto. Does Bitcoin go higher, and does the market follow it? That's what I'm saying. Do we see the tax cuts or this Doge dividend or whatever, if the market focus on something else? But I think something's going to happen. It's going to cause the market and Bitcoin to rally. And I'm just telling you, the market has moved down to the 200, and it's following what Bitcoin did. The same Elliot Wave count now for both of them. Institutions watch these 200 periods. Are we going to see this attempted rally? But Bitcoin here trying to get a bottoming tail as well. At the moment, a hammer. We sold off and got. We had that initially with the S&P and Nasdaq, and we sold off. And we ended up getting those spinning tops. We'll see what happens. Bitcoin's got a few hours to the close. If you're interested in Bitcoin, you can see my latest Bitcoin video at the end of this one. I'll link it. If Bitcoin's not your thing, that's okay. But I'm just trying to tell you, the market is following Bitcoin at the moment. And if it's establishing a bottom and getting a higher low here, we could see the S&P and NASDAQ try to bottom. That's all I'm trying to say. And all the concerns right now about all of the tariffs and the trade war and the inflation and everything. When if Trump shows up tonight at the address to Congress, and he said, "Hey, I got a phone call from Mexico. I got a phone call from Canada, from Justin Trudeau, and they struck another deal, or they made further concessions, and Trump paused the tariffs again." When if that happens, the markets would do? What do you think futures would do? We'd likely see a big rally. I'm just telling you, look, again, watch this speech tonight, address to Congress and to the nation. If we don't see something in it that tries to help the markets, whether tax related or whether we get a tariff rally out of everything, a relief rally. No, but I'm just telling you, we're at key support and we're forming bullish divergences. Look at the futures right now ahead of Trump's speech addressing Congress. Again, we've got the bullish divergences going on right here with the MACD and the Awesome Oscillator and the stochastic. So again, we could see something happen with futures during that address on into the opening bell tomorrow. We could see something happen if we begin to see divergences now complete and start getting green Awesome Oscillator bars and a bullish MACD cross, stochastic recycling back up. So I'm just telling you, look at this. Now, this is the after hours trading. The market's closed here, but I'm just showing you, you've got these bullish divergences, very similar to what we've been looking at on the intraday charts for the S&P 500 and for the NASDAQ. I wouldn't be surprised to see tariffs paused or reduced or something happen. Or does the market just shrug it off and start paying attention to something else? I don't know. Something's about to happen. All of these bullish divergences as we're hitting our 200 period, as we have the bearish sentiment is at a 1-year high right now. And the fear greed index is at extreme fear right now. It is with Bitcoin as well. This is what bottoms are made of. I think something's going to happen to give us a relief rally, and I do think the S&P is still going to go make new highs. I still think Bitcoin's going to go make new highs, and I think they're going to top. Now, as I'm making the video, the futures are now starting to rise as the Commerce Secretary is now coming out and saying that Trump could scale back the tariffs on Canada and Mexico on Wednesday. The compromise with Canada and Mexico could be announced. Again, the very things I'm talking about in this video are now happening. And what I told you, again, them go away, we could see them pause, we could see them reduced. I think you're going to get a big tariff relief rally. Something's going to happen that's going to create a bottom, as I continue to say. But as I'm making the video, this is now coming out. We're seeing futures start to rise. Bullish diversions that I just talked about. That news just broke, and we just opened from the lunch break to start the Wednesday session. And again, now we're seeing a jump. We're up 0.75%. We're up about 42 points as we start the new session for the Wednesday session after the lunch break with futures. So again, I told you, I expect something's going to happen to give us some kind of relief rally in all likelihood. We still may flirt with that 200 a little bit more, but you got a good shot with those spinning top candlesticks, daily time frame, testing of the 200 period moving average by NASDAQ, taking it out, S&P being just above it. Got a good shot. We could try to bottom surrounding those 200 period moving averages with those candles of indecision that we got with the bullish divergences, the intraday charts like right here with the 4-hour chart of futures. So again, watching to see if futures tries to rally big time by going into tomorrow's open or not, or is there more work to be done flirting with those 200 periods? But you very well could have a bottom with today's candles, the spinning top candlesticks in the daily time frame. Please support the channel with the link directly below that allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you like the charts, you like the indicators, let me know that by supporting the channel today. Take a moment to partner with me. I would really, really appreciate it if you could take a moment to do that. Follow the link below to take you to a secured site, and you can donate any amount you want. Most YouTube channels make their money by selling you stuff. Sponsors, I get contacted all the time. I turn that stuff down because I don't want to sell you stuff. Send you to gold sites that only want to charge you triple commissions. There's a lot of shady things on the internet. Don't want any part of it. So I just ask that you just partner with me, do what you can, and help out. It's a lot of time and effort to do this. If you could take a moment to do that, I would really, really appreciate it. I thank you for your consideration for that. Again, right after I told you about the divergences on the 19th, we had our failed breakout on the S&P and the NASDAQ. Again, that was validated with a reversal of conditions with momentum here, and it's been bearish ever since. And again, bars reflecting the momentum have been bearish. What I'm going to be watching for is now that we're testing the 200, let me bring it up here. Now that we're testing the 200 period moving average, a black line right here at 57.26, rounding up just under 57.26, which again, we filled that gap on NASDAQ and hit the 200. Here on the S&P, we took out the January low and hit this 200 period. Do we start seeing green bars on the Awesome Oscillator? We'll be watching that. Again, very good chance you're going to see a bottom develop here just above the 200 or maybe just below it. Do we see some kind of bottom surrounding this level and get a relief rally? That could happen sooner rather than later, or again, you might drop below this level and hang out there. But I keep pointing out, we've got these divergences that are forming. Maybe they're not done on the 60-minute charts. We're getting close if they're not done yet. And again, let's see a bottom develop surrounding this 200 period moving average on the S&P 500. NASDAQ, that candle of indecision at the 200 period again after the failed breakout above the December high. Again, I told you we had no confirmation to that. Now we've seen the sell-off back to the 200 period. We'll be watching what happens with this bar. Is it a continuation spinning top, or is it a reversal bar? It could be a reversal bar. Again, an evening or morning star reversal if we get a wide range bar back up on the S&P and on the NASDAQ. We'll be watching to see what happens come tomorrow. Futures overnight, I'll be watching that to see if the futures market reacts to anything that the president might say in his address to Congress. You're looking for green Awesome Oscillator bars at some point, in all likelihood this week, on the NASDAQ. We'll see if we try to bottom surrounding this area or dip below it again and try to find a bottom surrounding the 200 period moving averages. NASDAQ was down today. Nvidia was up. It was up 1.69%. It's forming this divergence. You got it here with the Awesome Oscillator. You've got it with other indicators, MACD. You see Nvidia try to form a bottom soon. Maybe it's not done yet. We have the lower channel line, and let me just show you. Nvidia has now dropped 28% from the high over here, back down, and then from the lower high at this gap fill area and the trend line, we have now dropped 23, almost 23.5%. We took out the 200 period, took it out over here, got back above it, filled the gap, hit the trend line, turned back down. We talked about all that, and that's why I told you we are going to get a sell-off on February 19th with those negative divergences because we're hitting this resistance area. So now we get this candle today where we have an up day, still might hit this lower channel line right here before all is said and done. But again, can we see Nvidia attempt to rebound back up? And if we do we get back above that 200 period moving average without a death cross happening with the 50 and the 200? Nvidia ended up selling off with earnings. After we had the earnings with that peak and reversal, we saw the earnings after that, and it ended up selling off just like it did back with the earnings over here in November. Ended up selling off. Got a bullish divergence. You can see it here. On the RSI, you've got a bullish divergence here, ever so slightly down here on the MACD as the stochastics trying to recycle back up, and you got a bullish divergence there as well. So again, do we see a bottom with Nvidia that tries to help the NASDAQ? And if so, can it get back above that 200 period moving average? So I'll continue to watch Nvidia. We have this massive larger. If we continue to make our way down towards the lows over here from August, you have this massive head and shoulders that could still be under construction. But we'll be watching to see if we recover with a potential divergence now developing here on the MACD and the RSI with the stochastic being oversold. That help the NASDAQ. Important economic data as well. We got the jobs report, or the private payrolls tomorrow with the ADP tomorrow. We've got jobless claims, and then we've got that jobs report on Friday, and we'll be watching that. It's supposed to be 170,000 Again, the jobs being lost as the government is shrinking eventually will make its way into the jobs report. Whether it's going to be this one or not, we'll be watching closely. We have Fed Chair Powell speaking during the market session on Friday as well. So just some things to be paying attention to. You've got the tariffs and you've got Trump's address to Congress. You now have the retaliatory tariffs, and you have the jobs report on Friday, Powell speaking. So it's just a lot for the market to digest. So whether we go lower and then come back towards this trend line, or whether we try to do it right here and now, I'll be watching this trend line as well, just like I'm watching that trend line on Bitcoin. I talked about the NASDAQ's gap getting filled here from the election. I talked about the hollow red candlestick and the spinning top candlestick with here at the 200 period, which we saw close up here. Let's look at the 60-minute chart. We're filling that gap from the election rally on the NASDAQ on the daily. We just saw it. I've zoomed in here so you can't see that. We just see the other gap being filled back up here from the CPI rally. CPI rally there in January. But look at this again. Look at the divergences on the 60-minute chart as we're tagging the 200 period moving average. Now again, maybe we flirt with the 200 a little bit more, but you have a bottoming tail below the 200, just exactly what Bitcoin did. That's exactly what the NASDAQ just did. Hollow red candlestick there. Bitcoin got a doji and a bottoming tail there. They both had similar bottoming tail type of candlesticks. So could we see a bottom? And this channel is still pretty much intact. The S&P kind of blew through it, but NASDAQ tagged it again, forming another reference point of a divergence. Look at this multiple point divergence on the RSI. The MACD moved to a new low on the NASDAQ, on the S&P, but you still got this nice divergence right here on, you had the lower low here. We got a higher low on our MACD. And while we don't have that on the MACD with the S&P 60-minute chart, you do have it here on the NASDAQ. Maybe the divergences aren't done yet. We go down and we drop below this low and drop below the 200 again, and there's more testing time. We'll see what happens. But you got a nice looking channel. I'd be watching for this channel to break out. We rallied back up to that channel and stalled there at the very end of the session, getting that spinning top in the daily time frame. During the rally, we saw the NASDAQ and the S&P go positive. NASDAQ still ended down 30 or 73 points, down 0.36%, but they actually had rallied and went positive. So do we see some kind of relief rally? I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm just telling you, you've got bullish divergences forming as we test the 200 with extreme fear and very bearish sentiment. And that's usually what happens surrounding bottoms. So we'll be watching this closely. Got the market following Bitcoin down to the 200 period moving average. Bitcoin trying to rebound off of it after testing it again today. Could we be following Bitcoin's lead? Look at these divergences on the RSI. Again, I showed you on the S&P these divergences over and over again. Look at these divergences. The peaks that have marked again, the divergences and the multiple points of divergences, and that's what we have right now. If we don't see something happen with futures overnight that gives us a rally, maybe we go beyond the 200 period. I've drawn a parallel boundary here with this upper boundary. So this is an area I'm looking at just directly below. Now, again, my other Elliott Wave count has now been invalidated. We moved below the January low. And again, I thought there was a good chance that we would try to bottom around the trend line or bottom around the CPI gap fill. We took that out. And we took out the January low today. So I was wrong about that. A week and a half ago, I gave you, before the tagging of that trend line, I gave you the different scenarios, the Elliott Waves. They've all been eliminated now except for this count. And that's what, again, I don't trade Elliott Wave, but I use it as a process of validating or invalidating what is going on in the market. I think we have two possibilities. That we have this intermediate wave 4 right here, and we completed a 1, 2, and this whole thing now is 3. And rather than 3 completing over here, it's completed over here. That's what the count I've moved to with Bitcoin. And we now have this ABC, and now we're going to get the wave 5 that's going to take us in all likelihood to new all-time highs here, then we're going to top. And again, I think that, again, the amount of bearishness here will likely develop a bottom. But I was looking at this trend line right here, which was the trend line from the 2023 low. We violated that. We've come down to our 200 period, just as Bitcoin went down and tested the 200 period. Now NASDAQ and S&P are testing their 200 periods. Again, the other count that I was showing you previously, and again, I think the other count is more likely that we have this, 1, 2, 3, and this whole thing is wave 4, which again, I think it's less likely. I think this whole thing is likely wave 3, because that would mean that we have this massive wave 4 and this very, very small wave 2. And I think that it's more likely this is the wave 4, which would be more in keeping with this, with a similar size of the wave. This whole thing up, I think the other count, so rather than 3 here, I think 3 finished over here, and I'm doing the same thing on Bitcoin, and then I think we have this run up. So again, this count still possible. Again, they both suggest that we're going to complete a minor wave 4. So I don't think wave 3 is here anymore. I think it's over here. And again, Elliot Wave is speculation. It's pretty amazing how a lot of the times those counts really do play out very nicely. You have to have multiple counts because you got to have the process of elimination. And that's why it's speculation, and that's why I never trade it. I'm telling you, I am looking for a bottom with it because of the divergences and the indicators that have become very, very oversold here. And they've been oversold since we hit our trend line. My signals have been bearish. They couldn't turn back to bullish. And then we've now seen this bigger drop from last Thursday, and then we ended up trying to rebound at the gap fill area, and it was unsuccessful. Now we've taken out the January low. Now I was right in calling the top over here at the 19th. I was right about the sell-off, but I told you I thought we'd bottom around the trend line here, or bottom around the CPI gap fill, one of those, and see the January low hold. I was wrong about that. Right about the top, right about the sell-off, but we went lower. I told you last Friday I thought we had a bottom. I was wrong about that. We very well could see it in this area and possibly trying to form it here, testing our 200 period. We'll be watching to see if that is in fact the case here. But again, something happened this week. Maybe rally overnight or on into later in the week. See the tariff fears end up going away immediately and we get this big relief rally. Could be. Had that last time. We'll see if something like that happens again. I don't know, but I'm just telling you a major level of support that the institutions watch with bullish divergences, and again, handle of indecision now that could be a possible reversal bar with the S&P and the NASDAQ, that hollow red candlestick on NASDAQ. Being lower today on the 5-minute chart, and then we turned back up. We tried to bottom just above that 200 period. We rallied back up to the 200 period here on the 5-minute chart. We got rejection there. The 50 is still below it. So again, what happens here? Do we come back and take out that low and take out the 200 period moving average, or does that spinning top give us some type of reversal? Because a spinning top is like a doji. It can be a reversal bar. We'll be watching there in the daily time frame. We've got these divergences. So far, they've just given us counter trends. We'll be watching to see if this multiple point divergence eventually produces a reversal. Now, again, we still may come down and go one more time below that 200 period moving average. But again, pointing out we have those divergences with futures. Do we end up seeing some kind of here? It was a channel, and we broke through. I showed you that channel yesterday, and we broke through the lower boundary of that. And I didn't draw that very straight. I had this trend line, and if we included the shadow over here, you had a nice channel, but we broke through that level. And here on the 60-minute chart, we've now taken out the January low. We'll be watching the CPI gap fill. I told you I thought the gap would fill, and we'd probably get a higher low. Wrong about that. We went lower, and now we're tagging that 200, which is what I told you. If I was wrong about getting a higher low above the January low at the CPI gap fill, that 200 would come into play. But look at the divergences that are forming. So this is interesting. We're hitting our 200 period moving average. You got those divergences with futures, with the 4-hour chart here on the 60-minute chart, and it's almost equivalent to the 60-minute chart, the 4-hour chart of futures, because it trades nearly round the clock. Got these bullish divergences going on. And again, these divergences have marked the turning points. Now, when I that top on the 19th, we had this divergence. And that was correct. The sell-off was correct. Did we go lower than I thought? Yep, we went lower. Wrong about getting a higher low? Yep, I was wrong. right about the top and I was right about the sell-off. Do we see a bottom with the huge amount of negative sentiment, bearish sentiment? Do we see a bottom surrounding those 200 period moving averages as we try to carve out there with Bitcoin? At least so far, that bottom that I called last Friday on Bitcoin, so far that's holding. The one that I called for the S&P is not. So far, Bitcoin's is holding. Do we see the S&P and NASDAQ follow Bitcoin's lead and try to rally back up and then get a higher low and so forth? But I'll be watching. Do we try to rally back up above this trend line right here with these bullish divergences and trying to bounce or rebound off the 200? Or do we hit the 200 again and then try to rebound? We'll see what happens. Do we drop below it? MACD tried to form a divergence here, and we ended up moving to a new low. So again, there's no divergence on the MACD, but you have a multiple point divergence on the RSI, and you have it on other indicators. But it could still be under construction if we try to take out that 200 period as Bitcoin did. NASDAQ did it today. We'll be watching to see what happens. Something's going to happen because we're seeing all these bullish divergences form. There's further testing first, but again, I think there's a very good chance we see some kind of bottoming process this week, outing all these bullish divergences. And this is exactly what Bitcoin had on its 4-hour chart. Again, I just want to go back to this real fast and show you the 4-hour chart, which is very similar to the 60-minute chart on the S&P 500 because Bitcoin trades around the clock. Look at the bullish divergences. This is exactly what the S&P is doing. That led to this bottom at the just below the 200 period, led to about a 22, almost a 22% rally, just under a 22%, well, 1.5%, 21.5%. Looks like I'm a little shy there, but call it 21.5%. We've had this pullback for a higher low. Do we see the S&P get something like that? Do we see not 21%? Bitcoin gets these exaggerated moves up and down, but do we see some big rally on the S&P back up towards that declining trend line? S&P rallies towards its declining trend line. NASDAQ, it's a big rally back up. Similar diversions here on Bitcoin that we have on the S&P right now.